Welcome to the British Lawnmower Museum. It's situated in Southport, the sunny Victoria seaside town on the northwest coast. Museum started in the 80s with a lot of machines that sadly were going to be discarded, and it seemed such a shame. There's machines made by Royal Enfield, who are famous for the motorbikes, Vincent motorbikes, Fraser Nash cars, Jeremy Pearson Precision Engineering that made all the cast aluminium for Rolls-Royce cars. And so instead of throwing them away, we started restoring them, and we've ended up with 1,000 machines, and in the museum we show 200 restored models. This particular one here is one of the first Aco machines, and Aco is a company that never made lawnmowers. Machine came about because they had a donkey that pulled the lawnmower around the factory grounds, and sadly the donkey died, and the managers got together and said, is there not another way to cut the grass without getting another poor horse or a pony? And the managers got together and they designed this new chassis, which was an open frame cast iron chassis, and it came out at 18 guineas. Atco also went on to make a car in 1939. It was going to be for the Road Safety Traffic Act. Sadly, they made it just before World War II, and the production had to stop and went on to the war effort. They also made the carriage for the bouncing bomb. This is the first lawnmower. It's a replica, and it was originally made in 1830 by a gentleman called Edwin Beard Budding. He never set out to make a lawnmower. He worked in a woolen mill in Stroud in Gloucester, and the mill owner got an order for guardsmen's uniforms, and he went to Edwin, who was a problem solver, and said, make me a machine for cutting all the tufts and the bobbly bits off the cloth. I want it to be perfect. And what he designed was a spinning blade over a fixed blade, and he also found that it cut the grass very efficiently. But it wasn't plain sailing for him, because everybody thought he was just a complete lunatic and a madman for making such a strange contraption. So he had to test his machine at night time so nobody would see him. And eventually he brought it out onto the market and said, gentlemen will find my machine amusing and healthy exercise. And his principles never changed to this day. And sadly, he died penniless, never knowing how popular his lawnmower was going to be. This is the original patent that we have in the museum archive. One of the museum exhibits is this special machine made by Allett around the 1970s. Really well made. It's got heavy duty bearings. It has a unique rubber rear roller, and all the adjustments are by hand. No spanners needed, adjustable handle and ball bearing front roller, and it wheels really nicely. One of the quietest machines on the market, especially with the rubberised roller. This machine was made by Vincent Motorbikes, really well made, all aluminium chassis, and they always had a unique thing on their motorbikes, and on their lawnmower the handle is the fuel tank, and they've bolted it directly onto the cylinder head. Quite unique. This machine belonged to Brian May from the rock band Queen, and he wanted it to have a happy retirement and wished the same for himself when he retired. He said it had done sterling work and was the Gilbert Harding of lawnmowers. This is Suffolk Colt from the late 50s, very popular in the 60s and even into the 70s. And we gave this machine to James May in 350 bits, and he put it together on a TV programme called The Reassembler. Here's a Qualcast electric Super Panther from Eric Morecambe, and it was collected on a sunny afternoon when Eric Morecambe was celebrating the birth of his first baby, and he was on the lawn writing "It's a boy in the lawn with weed killer." And Bart Simpson years later copied him, writing "Bart in the grass" on his birthday with weed killer. And it's now one of Lancashire's 70 special objects. Nicholas Parsons rang up one day and said, would I like his old lawnmower, and I went down to collect it and said, here's my lawnmower, would you like my spade, my fork, my hoe, would you like my pressure washer? He's a really nice guy. This machine went on the latest film, Downton Abbey. Everything was set in the late 1920s. This is the world's largest hand mower. It's originally made in 1935 from a Lloyd's 36-inch gang mower. This unique machine was made in the 60s, and it's the only hand-powered rotary that I've seen on the market. We've recently received one of the original machines from Lord's Cricket Ground. It looks very similar to this one. This was the first one made in 1904 by Ransom's, and it was for Cadbury's Chocolates employees for their sports field. In the mid-1830s, the huge agricultural company Ransom bought the licence off Edwin Budding to make his machines, and this was their first machine. It was called the New Automaton. A nice machine made in Guildford by Drummond Brothers in the early 1900s. It was called the Willing Worker, and you needed to be because it weighs 100 weight. All the original machines were painted in green. Because the machine was so heavy, they painted them silver to look lighter. This machine was made by the Enfield Cycle Company that went on to be Royal Enfield. Has the kickstart, really well made machine. In here we have a few rich and famous people that have donated their items. One of them is from Lee Mack. If you go to YouTube and put Lee Mack and Dibber, you may find it entertaining. There's also Vanessa Phelps' Dibber, Alan Titchmarsh's Weeder, Roger McGough's trowel, and quite a few others. This is an early machine from Green's of Leeds and London, one of their hand machines, again made before the chain was invented. They all had Latin names, and this one was called the Multum in Parvo, and the translation is with a little you get a lot out of it. And next to it is the new super duper model called the Green's Silence Messer, and that was the first machine to have a chain fitted to it, and it's in the Guinness Book of Records for never changing the model for 70 years. Nice machine from the 1960s made by Wilkinson Sword, and they had a unique cutting design. This machine belonged to Albert Pierpoint, Britain's most famous hangman. He hung 400 people and got paid £15 per hanging. Coincidentally, his lawnmower cost him £15, and we always wondered who paid for his lawnmower. And the term money for old rope comes from this gentleman. Here's the first electric lawnmower made in 1926 by Ransom. Before the internal combustion engine was invented, they used horses and ponies to pull the lawnmowers round, but they didn't want to have hoof prints in the freshly cut grass, so they had donkey boots, pony boots, horse boots, and these are Shire horse boots. And we went to a lady in the Lake District who had a lawnmower. When we got there, she was 96 years old, all chatting away, and she said, I remember when I was 6 and our coachman used to take me round with the horse and carriage, and he used the same horse to pull the lawnmower around the grounds, and he didn't want the horse to wee all over the freshly cut grass, so he used to take the horse along with the lawnmower into the bushes where he'd do a whistle, and when he whistled the horse would relieve itself and fertilise the plants, then he could go back out again. Here's a machine part of our lawnmowers of the rich and famous. It belonged to Prince Charles and Princess Diana, and it was one of their wedding presents. Prince Charles was quite a keen gardener, and this is Prince Andrew and Prince Edward with a Webb toy lawnmower. The idea was to encourage a child to cut the grass just like Dad would do. The Aco Car was designed to train a young person to learn to drive, maintain and repair a car before they ventured onto the road. It was made for the government's Road Safety Act, and it was the spark for young enthusiasts to become Grand Prix drivers and the Mons winners. Sadly, they were manufactured in 1939 and World War II broke out and Aco had to turn their efforts to the war. This is a qual-cast Panther from Jean Alexander, alias Hilda Ogden from Coronation Street, along with Paul O'Grady's alias Livy Savage, and that was for his birthday present. The first robot lawnmower was invented in 1995 by Husqvarna. Cost £1 million to develop, and it just used daylight. The solar panels are the same as fitted on the space shuttle. Lawnmower racing is a great sport. It's one of the cheapest forms of motor racing. It doesn't cost you an arm and a leg unless you run over yourself. And this was a machine that we converted. Really good fun. Sterling Moss is a keen lawnmower racer, along with Noel Edmonds, Chris Tarrant, and loads of other people. So this is a reciprocating knife machine, where it's driven by a big wheel. This particular model went on Scrap Heap Challenge. A gentleman called Carl Dolman went to a Brussels Inventors Fair with Sir Christopher Cockerell's hovercraft design with an engine on the top of a dustbin lid and said he'd invented the hovercraft lawnmower. But it wasn't plain sailing for Carl, because people looked at it and it was the first time a lawnmower had been made out of plastic, and it didn't look like a lawnmower. And they had the same problem that Edwin Buddin had in 1830. So in the mid-60s, he went and got 50 representatives, gave them a fly mower each and say, go knocking door to door, see the lady of the house and have a go with this, it's nice and light. And they also surveyed 2,000 housewives and said, if you had a choice of colour for your lawnmower, what colour would you like? And the overwhelming colour was orange, and that's why they're still orange today. One of the problems that they had was, in the mid-60s, plastic was deemed very flimsy. The fact that it was stronger than a police riot shield didn't seem to make much difference. Museums open every day, except Sundays and bank holidays. I'm sure you'll find it a cut above the rest and something to remember forever. Mower.